Relatively small area. In this relatively small area of the internet, once a story starts to roll and a narrative begins to be painted, you can start to see it everywhere. Over the past couple of months, you might have seen this yourself if you follow MMORPGs closely. And yes, I'm going to be talking about the Final Fantasy XIV situation, specifically the success of the game, and something that always goes hand in hand with another MMORPG gaining popularity, the impact that this would have on World of Warcraft in particular.
Mikis, thank you very much
for being
grossing for 3 months.
Compare and constantly discuss World of Warcraft when talking about Final Fantasy XIV, but I believe it's a really interesting angle to explore and has much deeper implications for the genre than what you might originally think. So this video is mostly going to be going through some of my thoughts on the descent of World of Warcraft and the ascent of Final Fantasy XIV. As someone whose job it is to keep my finger on the pulse of the oftentimes mistaken for dead genre of MMORPGs, I've followed the social media sentiment of this particular narrative for years now, and the recent ramp up could easily be speculated as being the perfect storm. And what I mean by this is Final Fantasy XIV is obviously on the ascension. Whether you like the game or not, it is impossible to argue with this fact. And on the flip side of this, World of Warcraft is on the descent, and due to this dynamic, they're working in tandem to change the face of the MMORPG genre that we've known for over 15 years. World of Warcraft has been the titan of the genre for that period of time. It has always been World of Warcraft at the top of the mountain, being manually fanned and fed grapes by supermodels like a Roman emperor, and the rest of the games somewhere near the bottom of the mountain throwing human shit.
And see, that's the thing. It's exactly like he just said. World of Warcraft is usually the one on the top being fed grapes by hot models and stuff like that. And that aspect of it, the amount of success that World of Warcraft has enjoyed is potentially what has fueled the attitudes of what we were talking about earlier with the lawsuit and all of that stuff. Mobu's Dragon, thank you very much for being grossing at this for 7 months. Tip of the hat. Appreciate the support. And like, you know how they always say that Blizzard developers think of themselves as rock stars? That's why. It's like, oh, we got the best game. It's the best. We're the best. And so that, in turn, fuels that type of like office environment of the what do you call the cubicle crawls or whatever the hell it was. It's like, yeah, because like, oh, I'm invincible. I'm on top of the world. I can do whatever I want.
Shit at each other in the streets. The gap in player numbers and impact was at times to that level of disparity. World of Warcraft transcended the genre. They brought in players that had never heard of an MMORPG, players that had never played one, and amazingly, even players that were never players in any games. The game changed the face of the genre and they brought more players into the ecosystem than anyone will ever give them credit for. And so whenever any new MMO is released, it is always going to be judged next to this titan, and every single time they've been found wanting. They would not trouble the balance of power in the genre. But over the years, the rot of Activision Blizzard has set in. Where exactly it is, I'm not capable of saying. Is it at the corporate level, as many assume? You know, the Activision bosses rolling shit downhill to Blizzard on a fundamental level, altering the experiences that they ship to the previously eager and incredibly loyal customer base that they'd built up to this stage? Or is it at the design level, where they seem to have lost touch so badly with their player base, they no longer know what the game needs to be, or even how to cater to the audience that paid subscriptions year-round in expansions gone by? There will be elements of this that are, of course, based on us as consumers. Maybe the game has gotten a little stale in places and we need more of a shake-up. It needs to be more different. Or maybe since World of Warcraft has changed so drastically over the years, we are somewhat incapable of accepting it's just a different game now for a
I think the problem with World of Warcraft is that it is getting further and further away from the core concepts of what made it good. Like, World of Warcraft was never made to be this thing like we talked about the retention mechanics, because that's all that Blizzard is doing. It's retention mechanics. Like, forget about retention. Just make a good game. A good game will retain players. A good game will retain players. Not retention mechanics will retain players, because the more, you know, we go down this path of Blizzard doing this and essentially players reporting on it, people like me, people like Asmongold, people like Kira here, like people will report on the tactics that Blizzard is using to retain their players, and people basically are seeing behind the curtain. It's like you go through and you're like, okay, so you want me to do this amount of dailies, you want me to deal with this amount of systems, and then people actually start asking themselves, why do you want me to do this? And it's like, oh, you want me to do this because you start analyzing the timelines. It's like, oh, these features unlock at a certain specific point in time so that you can squeeze more subscription time out of me. You don't want me to achieve things in game too fast so that you'll continue having me play the game. So you don't actually care if the content is fun so long as I'm paying my subscription. And that is the problem. Like World of Warcraft, it's not that World of Warcraft, the old World of Warcraft is getting old. It's more like the new World of Warcraft is bad. It's just poorly made in terms of its systems. Again, the only good thing is the raid encounters in the dungeons. That's the saving grace of World of Warcraft. It's their dungeons and raid encounters. And for some people, I guess the PvP. But even PvP, considering how piss poor balanced it is, sometimes I struggle to understand why people, they're into PvP. I guess that because, they either main a class or they just plan their character in order to, I'm going to play this character because this character is going to be relevant in this patch. I don't find that interesting. I find PvP to be interesting when it is based around player skill, not exactly what is the flavor of the month class. Not exactly like if you're playing this class, don't even bother coming to PvP. Like, because a lot of times people are like, oh, PvP in World of Warcraft is so great. Well, it's popular. Great is not necessarily the word that I would use to describe it.
Totally different audience. One thing is very clear though, while the answer to why may be something we can never nail down or quantify, World of Warcraft is in a massive decline in every single metric that matters to the public, and in the ascendancy in the single metric that matters to Activision shareholders, revenue. And even this, I'd say as a non-business educated individual, that this short-term revenue increase Blizzard reports is one that is doomed to betray them due to the nature of how they've managed to get to that figure. They've traded short-term financial growth for long-term sustainability in their player base. The revenue numbers might go up as they introduce new ways for existing players to spend a higher sum of money per individual than they would gain from multiple subscriptions from multiple people.
The eShop whales.
The more that they squeeze that stone that is the player base while not making positive strides to address the community complaints, the more of that player base are going to quit the game. To make more money from a smaller player base, you've got two options. Make long-term changes that bring back players, or introduce more ways to milk the existing ones, causing this problem to become gradually worse. And that seems...
So make no mistake, if you happen to be a World of Warcraft whale, hey, you should spend your money on whatever you think is right. But Blizzard is going to increasingly and more aggressively milk you for your money. Because the players that are not whales, they're seeing behind the curtain. They're done. They're getting done with this nonsense that Blizzard is doing with these engagement metrics and all this other bullshit. And, Blizzard's going to be like, well, the casuals are leaving. Guess we got to bilk those whales. Hey, make a new store mount. Hey, make like a new store transmog. So you can, I imagine that like if you're a World of Warcraft whale, right? You're someone who buys a lot of stuff in the eShop. I imagine that your expenditure in WoW has not been like a steady line. It's not like you've been spending, okay, I'm putting like, let's say 500 bones in WoW, like every month or so. Instead of that, it's probably been something like, let's even say on a year basis, right? Let's say on any given year, you've put like $2,000 in World of Warcraft. Next year, you might have put $2,500 because they put more stuff on the store. The year after that, you're probably putting like $4,000, $5,000, $10,000. Because the number of players that are dropping, and if the leaks that we recently read are to be believed, where they're saying that even though those players are dropping, they're making up for it with the eShop, it's just like, dude, those whales are dropping fat stacks on this game. And Blizzard is going to make sure that you're going to drop a lot more. So pay attention. If you're someone that, usually buys stuff on the did I say eShop? I did say eShop. Stuff on the Blizzard shop. Like, pay attention to your expenditures. Take a look at your bank account, like extracts, and actually look at how much you've spent on World of Warcraft on a yearly basis, and see if that hasn't been growing and growing and growing. And you expect that trend to keep growing and growing and growing until there's like a very small amount of players that are pretty much just funding this microtransaction free-to-play game that you actually pay to play.
Where they're at with this. And obviously the monetization would not be as big of a deal if the game was actually great and doing really well. This would not be a big deal. You've only got to look at other games that have traditionally been labeled as pay to win and absolutely gross monetization. If the game's actually good, people are going to play it and still just accept that. But with World of Warcraft, while still being more popular than people will likely give it credit for, and likely still being the #1 MMO in terms of current player base, is considered by many to be in one of the worst states in the history of the game. And Blizzard doesn't seem to be capable right now of understanding what the issues are, let alone addressing them in any meaningful way. World of Warcraft was most popular back in Wrath of the Lich King. I think this is really the pinnacle of WoW. Personally, for me, Burning Crusade was my favourite expansion, and I would have liked to have seen some of the elements that came into Wrath not come in. But content-wise, it was great, and people agreed it was when most people were playing the game. And then expansion after expansion since Wrath, the game has become almost unrecognizable to me, and the playing numbers have reflected this. I think it's fairly easy to see where they've gone wrong. I still like World of Warcraft retail, but I return less often and for much shorter periods of time. Playing Burning Crusade Classic has reminded me of what WoW used to be, and WoW retail for me is like beating a mostly soft dick. Yeah, I'm probably still going to come, but it's a pathetic experience that reminds me of much better times. This brings us to Final Fantasy XIV. This game is in the exact opposite position. They have been in a state of constant growth since the...
So you're rock hard when you play Final Fantasy XIV? You're not beating on a limp dick?
release of Heaven's Ward, their first expansion. The social media sentiment about Final Fantasy XIV is that the player base absolutely loves the game. They worship the developers. They think that they can do almost no wrong, and the developers seem to love their player base as well. And every expansion has improved upon the already winning formula of the base game's vision. An MMORPG that started as an abject, colossal failure, reborn as a game that they still rushed out the door, and it showed. The Realm Reborn launch patch wasn't fantastic. They've since recognized that, and they've trimmed out some of the fat. Each expansion has improved the quality of the experience for the players who liked the idea of what a Realm Reborn represented. The developers clearly listened to and understand why the players played a Realm Reborn, and they figured out how to iron out the creases for an overall much better experience in almost every single way, and they just seem to keep hitting home runs with it. It just seems like the player base gets more and more excited about the game, and more people are playing it.
It's because of the fact that, like, they see what the player base is actually responding to. Like, hey, these players like this story, so story is always going to be a key element in our game. And they don't care. Like, for instance, you look at a lot of the criticism that Realm Reborn gets and that, you know, new players give to Final Fantasy XIV, right? Like, you see this criticism all the time where players just go like, oh man, I couldn't get into Final Fantasy XIV. There was too much story. There was too much of this, too much of that. But the team at Square, the Creative Business Unit 3, who are the people that are doing this, the Naoki Yoshida team, they basically are like, yeah, that's fine. It's not for this person. We don't need to cater to the single biggest amount of people. We don't need to change our game to cater to every single living being in the universe. We just need to focus on that core audience that is enjoying our game and keep improving on the things they are enjoying. We have to listen to the people that do like the story, that do enjoy the type of storytelling that we do, that do enjoy the type of raids that we do. We listen to them and we see how we can improve with what they like and what they don't like. And yeah, if we can appeal to a broader audience, that'd be great, but not by compromising on the core values of our gameplay experience. See, that is what Square is doing, and that is what Blizzard didn't do. Because, like, look, for instance, at vanilla World of Warcraft, right? How many people actually did Molten Core? It was a small portion of the player base. This was fine. I never got to do Molten Core in vanilla. I wanted to, but I never got to. And this is fine. This is perfectly okay that there's a significant chunk of players that will not see that content. Why? Because that is always content that you look at and you're like, oh man, I wish one of these days I could do it. And you kind of work towards it. And maybe you'll get to do it. Maybe you won't. That's fine. But, you know, Blizzard was like, no, everybody needs to see everything that we do. They need to see it. So we have to come up with systems and systems and systems to make sure that they see every single thing. So here's your looking for raid, which is completely automated. You go in there and it's like, hey, it's raiding, but without the mechanics. It's raiding, but everything is tank and spank. And it's like you go in there and you see like players dying by the thousands as like 4 or 5 players end up actually killing the boss. And then just like they streamline everything. They're like, let's make sure that, you know, some people don't like the story. Okay, we'll make that optional. Some people don't like questing. Okay, we'll make that optional. So, and then eventually in their hubris, they're like, okay, now we need to make sure that people play for as long as possible now that we have this huge player base of people because we're appealing to literally everyone under the sun. We need to make sure that we retain them. We need to make sure that we get these engagement metrics in. And suddenly they went from not requiring players to do that much to basically making people, okay, you want to like min-max your character, 30 hours of chores or something like that to go through all of the little things that we put in the world and these systems and that system. They completely lost sight of what people liked about their game, which is coming into a world, just interacting with other people, doing a couple of dungeons, getting some loot, and then, you know, eventually going into becoming a raider or not. Just enjoying the game for what it is. But it's not about enjoyment anymore. It's about, no, we got to make sure that you play. We need you to play. You need to play. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. It's like people will play if it's fun to play. And people are finally waking up to that. Also, Cincy Boiler, thank you very much for being grossly incandescent for 11 months. Tip of the hat. Appreciate the support. Thank you. Did you see this video yet? Reaction Andy Discord, last link. Let me see. Total Warlock also put something in here. I don't think I have seen that. We'll take a look at that in a minute. But okay, let's keep on with this.
I like to think that social media sentiment isn't a thing that really matters. And let's be honest, in a way it doesn't. You can bury your head in the sand and just play WoW. You can play World of Warcraft as much as you want, and you're unlikely to see any severe population issues in your content for a real long time, if ever. But the reality is this. Social media is a massive tool in shaping how a game is perceived, and this will have direct implications on the player base of both of these games. It's real hard and getting harder to find a large content creator for World of Warcraft, either on Twitch or YouTube, that hasn't at least gone to try Final Fantasy XIV recently. It's hard to find a news article from a single mainstream game publication that has good things to say about World of Warcraft or the content that they're putting out. And on the flip side of this, it's really easy to find people saying really good things about Final Fantasy XIV everywhere. Asmongold played Final Fantasy XIV recently in front of 210,000 live concurrent viewers. That first stream had almost 1 million unique viewers across the duration, and the VOD of that stream has 2.8 million views. The subsequent days of streams are in the millions, the numerous YouTube videos are in the hundreds of thousands, and this isn't even counting the plethora of other creators doing much the same, signal boosting this message to millions of other people. Final Fantasy is doing great. Contrast that to how WoW is being discussed, and you can see this is not going great for Blizzard. And if we remember back a few weeks, there was an article circulating in the Final Fantasy XIV community saying Final Fantasy XIV has finally, for the first time in history, climbed above World of Warcraft in player numbers. This, of course, was an article based on a fictional set of data from a website that hides their formula from the public since it's so laughably incorrect. It claims that games that don't exist anymore have thousands of players, games that publicly show their playing numbers to have vastly different stats to the official ones, and they mostly use Reddit activity as a metric to guess how popular the games are, which is worthless. But the point is, this article that was completely wrong was discussed at length, taken for face value as a fact to so many people, and it's building into the narrative that WoW bad, Final Fantasy good. So you can see where I'm going with this. World of Warcraft is going downhill, people are really unhappy with the game publicly, which is going to make less people try the game, and let's be realistic, most people that would have tried WoW have already tried it, but that is not true for Final Fantasy. So there's much more new players joining Final Fantasy, and there's more players leaving World of Warcraft than ever before. Now let's talk about the obvious. Some people say to look at people like Asmongold and to talk about them in this way is to put them on a pedestal. The idea behind this being that we're thinking they have more influence than they do. The argument to that is pretty simple. I'm not putting Asmongold on a pedestal, but he does have a huge impact and influence on everything that goes on with World of Warcraft.
We've already seen this direct impact in Google Trends. It's like, it's I don't even think that this is something that people can argue. And if they argue, they're probably, they probably haven't checked the stats of what has happened after this man started streaming Final Fantasy XIV, which it was a noticeable impact. It was huge. Come on.
And subsequently, the Final Fantasy situation. And it isn't really his fault either. You can tell he just wants to play the games and he just wants to do what he wants to do to have a good time. But whatever he does, it impacts the overall situation quite heavily, especially when you combine all these things together. You see him on WoW less often, the WoW numbers tank on social media platforms and things like YouTube and Twitch, and the Final Fantasy ones go up massively. People don't listen to what he has to say when he clearly states, I love WoW and will be back to playing it. They just see even Asmongold's not on WoW anymore, and Asmongold loves WoW. And if we examine how the two companies reacted to this situation, it further proves my point that this is the perfect storm. Not only do you have all-time low player sentiment for WoW in the public, not only do you have another MMORPG for the first time ever rising to the levels of popularity to maybe dethrone World of Warcraft, not only do you have the most prominent content creators on both of the largest gaming platforms in the world moving to this competitor, either in the long or the short term, but you have company representatives making things better or worse on both sides. Blizzard are straight taking L's on this one, and Final Fantasy are getting those dubs, as the cool kids are probably saying nowadays. On the day Asmongold goes in to try Final Fantasy, you have a Blizzard representative calling him an asshole publicly on Twitter. You honestly can't make this stuff up. I'm not sure whether Blizzard are so eager...
So dumb, dude. That was so dumb. That guy's an asshole. Fuck that guy.
Statistical and ignorant to the reality of how big of a deal this is, or if they simply just don't care and that they'd rather see their company suffer than to accept that Asmongold represents a fairly significant portion of their player base. Now, you can say that this person doesn't represent Blizzard's opinion as an entity, and of course you are right. Of course he doesn't, but he is comfortable saying that publicly while wearing a verified Twitter account due to being relatively high up in the company structure, and that speaks volumes to me. I don't think it's much of a leap to say this is something shared at the water cooler, and it isn't the first time we've heard or had reason to suspect that they aren't his biggest fans. And let's be honest, they don't have to be his biggest fan, they just have to not publicly trash him. And to be honest, it seems incredibly tone-deaf to me at a time you know he's about to start playing the only game that are currently poised to be your direct competition. You're going to go on social media and badmouth him. I mean, the fact you would do that anyway is dumb as fuck, but to do that at this exact time is just crazy to me.
And not to mention that, like, Blizzard needs to understand that Asmongold is a massive reason why so many people still play World of Warcraft. This is not an exaggeration. Asmongold is a massive reason why, well, used to be anyway, a massive reason why so many people play World of Warcraft. Like, this is a fact. I guarantee you.
All of this is important, I believe, not just because it is interesting, but because it does have actual deeper ramifications for the genre, and it's something I would like to see, honestly. If WoW does start to play second fiddle to Final Fantasy, it could finally kick them in the arse and hopefully get them to realize there needs to be a huge shake-up. You've been doing things wrong. You need to take a look at it again and start doing things right. Competition breeds excellence. World of Warcraft hasn't had competition literally ever. They originally got good by having passion and having people who had a clear vision for the game. Now they don't have that. At least, hopefully, they can motivate themselves with the competition of Final Fantasy. We've got to hope it does, and let's hope they can rise to that challenge and give us back the game that we love. That being said, I could talk about this subject all day. One thing I'm going to leave you with, since this was a pretty critical piece about Blizzard, is the following reality check that I think we all need to keep in mind when discussing this whole Final Fantasy versus World of Warcraft thing. Play what you enjoy, play what you like. I'm not saying to stop playing WoW because things are looking bad for it. I know obviously some people are going to say you don't want to get into a game that is on the decline in case things go wrong, but realistically World of Warcraft's not going to, it's not going to die in the next few years. You're totally fine on that point. And if you do still enjoy the game, despite the fact that a lot of people don't, it's not the biggest deal in the world. Just keep enjoying the game. Play what you enjoy. And at the end of the day, World of Warcraft did transcend the genre, as we already said. Almost everyone that has touched a video game in the last 15 years knows what World of Warcraft is. It's been everywhere. It's had mainstream crossovers and it has reached heights no other game in this genre has in the Western world. All it would take for WoW to get back to being an absolute fucking behemoth is a single good expansion. The word of mouth would travel, and the same content creators we discussed in this video that are part of this narrative of WoW's decline and Final Fantasy XIV's ascendancy, part of that story, would be banging the drum for the second coming of World of Warcraft, and in a very short period of time, those previously abandoned millions of accounts would be resubbed. I hope Final Fantasy XIV continues to climb to new heights, and I hope, honestly, that Blizzard rise to the challenge. I think that's the best case scenario. I want both games to do well, because if they both do well, they're going to push each other to be the best games that they can be, and as consumers, that's where we're going to win. Thanks as always for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Leave me a like and a comment to help with the algorithm. Subscribe if you haven't already. They're all free to do. Take you 2 seconds, and it really helps out my life a ton more than you can ever know. And we are on the way to 100k subs. I would love if you help me get there, because that has been a big goal of mine since I started making these videos. So yeah, also check out the social media links in the video description: Twitch, Discord, Patreon, and Twitter. Appreciate you all. Stay safe out there. We out. Peace.
Yeah. It's crazy how Blizzard are so blind to what is going on. I mean, blind or willfully ignorant, I don't even know anymore, but like, they've completely lost the plot. They have no idea what is going on, and they just can't respond. They just can't respond. It's like, again, they keep thinking that they're rock stars and that they can do no wrong, and as far as I'm concerned, they've been doing wrong for a while. They've been doing wrong for a long while, and they need to get their head out of their asses. Because them getting their head out of their asses would be good for everyone. But, it's hard to get their head out of their asses when it goes out of their ass and goes up a skirt of a female employee, because they're too busy doing cube crawls or packing butt plugs and lubricant into their travel bags so that they can sexually harass their female workers. But they have their priorities straight. It's fixing World of Warcraft is like very, 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 very low on their list of priorities. Playing Call of Duty and looking at women's panties, their co-workers' panties even, where they're cube crawls while they're getting completely wasted, that's a lot higher in their list of priorities. It is what it is.